A man stands before a crowd in a city on the southeast coast of India. He's thousands of miles from the fishing village where he was born. He has no army, no government backing, no protection. He knows what is coming. He has watched 11 of his closest friends choose the same road. And here is the thing that should stop you cold. He chose to be there. He could have gone home. He could have taken his fishing nets back out on the Sea of Galilee and lived quietly for another 30 years. He didn't. His name was Thomas. And he was about to become a martyr in a country that most of his fellow disciples had never even heard of. Most people know the names: Peter, James, John, Thomas, Matthew. You have heard them read aloud in church. You have seen them painted on cathedral ceilings. But almost no one knows what actually happened to them after Jesus rose from the dead and ascended into heaven. What did they do next? Where did they go and how did they die? Because 11 of the 12 did not die quietly. This is what we are going to do. We are going to walk through every single apostle, one by one, and look at where the historical record and church tradition take each of them. Not to dwell on the violence, but because understanding how they finished tells you something essential about why they started. These were not men who believed a pleasant religious idea. They were men who had seen something. And what they saw, they would not stop talking about, no matter what it cost them. Let us start at the beginning. Of all 12, James has the distinction no one would want. He is the only apostle whose death is recorded in the Bible itself. Acts 12:2 gives it to us in one sentence. And he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. That is it. No details. No final speech. Just a sword and a name. The year was around 44 AD, and King Herod Agrippa had him executed to please the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem. James was the first of the 12 to die. He had been with Jesus at the Transfiguration on the mountain. He had been in the Garden of Gethsemane the night of the arrest. He had seen the risen Christ. And then, roughly 14 years later, a king who wanted to score political points ordered his beheading. The Bible does not give him a dramatic farewell. It gives him a sentence, and somehow that understated death makes it more real, not less. Peter is the one most people know, the fisherman who walked on water and then sank. The man who denied Jesus 3 times on the night of his arrest and then wept bitterly. The same man who preached on the day of Pentecost and saw 3,000 people believe in a single afternoon. What most people do not know is how his story ended. Church tradition, supported by early writers including Origen and Eusebius, holds that Peter was crucified in Rome under Emperor Nero around 64 to 68 AD. And here is the detail most people miss. Peter asked to be crucified upside down. He said he was not worthy to die in the same way as his Lord. The man who once denied even knowing Jesus chose, at the end, to make his death a statement about the distance between himself and Christ. Not in shame this time, in reverence. Jesus had told him in John 21:18, "When you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." Peter understood exactly what that meant. And he went anyway. Andrew was Peter's brother. He was also the first apostle called, the one who brought Peter to Jesus in the first place. After the resurrection, tradition says Andrew traveled north into the regions of modern-day Greece, Turkey, and along the Black Sea coast. He eventually reached Patras in southern Greece, and there the Roman governor ordered him crucified. But not on a traditional cross, on an X-shaped cross, what we now call a St. Andrew's cross. The reason given in tradition is that Andrew, like his brother, did not consider himself worthy to die on the same kind of cross as Jesus. What makes the account striking is this. According to early church accounts, Andrew was not nailed to the cross. He was tied. and he hung there alive for 2 days, continuing to preach to the crowds who gathered around him until he died. That is the man who first heard the words, "Follow me," standing on the shore of a lake in Galilee. He followed for the rest of his life, and then some. Philip is one of the quieter figures in the Gospels. He appears at key moments, but rarely takes center stage. After the resurrection, tradition places him in the region of Hierapolis in modern-day Western Turkey, where he preached for years. He had once asked Jesus in John 14:8, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." Jesus answered him with a gentle rebuke. "Philip, have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me?" By the end of his life, Philip clearly knew the answer to his own question. Tradition says he was martyred in Hierapolis for refusing to stop preaching, in a city that would later honor him with one of the largest churches in the ancient world. It cost him everything, and he kept going anyway. Of all the deaths in the apostolic tradition, Bartholomew's is the one that tends to stop people. Tradition says he was martyred in Armenia. The method, according to multiple early church sources, was that he was flayed alive, skinned, and then beheaded. Michelangelo painted him that way in the Sistine Chapel's Last Judgment, holding a knife and his own skin. Here is what makes this remarkable. Most scholars believe Bartholomew and the man called Nathanael in the Gospel of John are the same person. This is the man Jesus saw approaching and said in John 1:47, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Jesus called him guileless, honest, true, and he stayed true to the end, in the most extreme way imaginable. Matthew is the tax collector, the man his neighbors would have seen as a traitor, someone who worked for the Roman occupation and got rich doing it. Jesus walked past his tax booth one day and said 2 words, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed. After the resurrection, tradition sends Matthew to Ethiopia, though the historical record here is less clear than with some of the others. Some traditions say he died peacefully, others say he was martyred. What is certain is that Matthew took the story he had witnessed and committed it to writing. The Gospel that bears his name is the most quoted document in all of early Christian literature. The tax collector became the first historian of Jesus, and the record he left has been read by more people than any other document in human history. If this is opening up the story for you in a new way, do us a favor right now. Hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Even one word helps other people find this content. That is genuinely how this grows. Thank you for being here. We started with Thomas, so let us give him his full story. Thomas is famous for one moment, John 20:25. "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." The man history called Doubting Thomas. But here is what most people miss about Thomas. When Jesus showed him the wounds, and Thomas believed, Thomas gave us the most direct declaration of Christ's identity in the entire Gospel of John. He said in verse 28, "My Lord and my God," not just teacher, not just rabbi, "my Lord and my God." And then he took that confession to the farthest place any apostle traveled. Tradition says Thomas went to India, not modern India as a concept. The actual subcontinent, thousands of miles from Jerusalem, through regions no Roman road connected to the known world. He founded churches there that still exist today. The St. Thomas Christians of Kerala trace their origin directly to him. Around 72 AD, tradition says he was speared to death near what is now Chennai. The man who needed to touch the wounds of Christ to believe died with a spear wound of his own. He had seen, he had believed, and he had never stopped going. This James is often called James the Less to distinguish him from James, the son of Zebedee. He is one of the quieter presences in the Gospels. Tradition says he ministered in Jerusalem for years after the resurrection. The account given by the early church historian Hegesippus, preserved in Eusebius, says he was eventually thrown from the pinnacle of the temple by the religious authorities, and then beaten to death with a club when the fall did not kill him. He was an old man by then. He died in the city where it all began, in the shadow of the temple where the sacrifices still continued, not knowing that the sacrifice had already been made. Thaddaeus, also called Judas, son of James, is the apostle who asks a question in John 14:22 that most of us have thought but never said out loud. Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world? A simple, honest question. Why us and not everyone? Jesus answered him with a promise about the Holy Spirit. Tradition sends Thaddaeus into the regions of modern-day Syria, Armenia, and Persia, traveling alongside Simon the Zealot. The two are said to have been martyred together in Persia, Thaddaeus killed by an axe or a lance. He asked his question. He received his answer, and he carried that answer to the ends of the earth. Before he followed Jesus, Simon was a zealot. That word meant something specific in first-century Judea. Zealots were Jewish nationalists who believed in armed resistance against the Roman occupation. Simon had likely spent years of his life convinced that the answer to Israel's problems was a sword. And then he ended up in a group with Matthew, a man who collected taxes for Rome. The distance between a tax collector and a zealot in that culture was enormous. They were on opposite sides of the most explosive political fault line of their generation. Jesus sat them at the same table. Tradition says Simon was eventually martyred in Persia alongside Thaddaeus. The man who once believed in political revolution died for a different kind of kingdom entirely. Matthias is the one most people forget. After Judas Iscariot died, the 11 gathered in Acts 1 to choose a replacement. They needed someone who had been with them from the beginning, from the baptism of John all the way through the resurrection. They prayed. They cast lots. The lot fell to Matthias. And from that moment, the New Testament goes almost completely silent on him. Tradition sends him to Ethiopia or to Colchis along the Black Sea. The accounts of his death vary. Some say stoned, others say beheaded. What is certain is that he was chosen for a role he did not volunteer for, received no fanfare, and did the work until it killed him. And then there is John, the last one, the youngest of the 12. The one Jesus called a son of thunder in Mark 3:17. The one who leaned against Jesus at the Last Supper. The one who stood at the foot of the cross when every other male disciple had fled. The one to whom Jesus, dying, looked down and said, "Behold your mother," entrusting Mary into his care. Of all the 12, John is the only one tradition says died of natural causes. He was exiled to the island of Patmos by the Emperor Domitian, where he wrote the book of Revelation. He was eventually released and returned to Ephesus, where he lived and died as an old man, the last living witness. He had seen more than any of them. He outlasted all of them. And the last words he ever wrote, Revelation 22:20, were these: "Come, Lord Jesus, still longing, still waiting, still faithful." So what do you do with 11 men who died violently and one who waited until the very end? Here is the thing that stays with me. None of these men had to do this. After the resurrection, Jesus appeared to his disciples, gave them a commission, and ascended. He did not post guards at their doors. He did not promise them safety. In fact, he promised them the opposite. He told them in John 15:20, "If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you." They knew what was coming, and they went anyway. There are only two explanations for what these men did. Either they were willing to die slowly and painfully for something they knew was a lie, or they were telling the truth. People die for things they believe to be true all the time. But people almost never die for things they know to be false. These were not followers of a legend. They were witnesses of an event. They had seen an empty tomb. They had eaten fish with a man who had been crucified 3 days before. And they spent the rest of their lives telling anyone who would listen, at the cost of everything they had. You do not have to travel to India or Persia to make your life count for something that outlasts you. But you do have to decide what you actually believe, because what you believe determines what you are willing to stay faithful to, when staying faithful is the hardest thing in the world. 11 men stayed faithful to the end of their lives. One stayed faithful to the end of a very long life, and the story they told is still being told 2,000 years later. If this changed the way you see these men, the most important thing you can do right now is subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. That is genuinely how more people find this content. We depend on you to spread the word. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you,